The April 14th meeting, the Michiana Area Council Governments Policy Board meeting to order. And we've finished roll call already, so we'll go ahead on to the minutes from March 10th. Is there any comments or discussion from the minutes from March 10th? If not, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
You have a motion, do we have a second? We've finished roll call.
Commissioner Grunninger, second.
Head on to the Thank you. We have a motion and a second to approve minutes from March 10th. Any comments? All those in favor raise your hand. If not, is there a motion to approve? Signify by vocally saying no. You have a motion. Those are approved. Thank you. We've finished. Move on to our reports. I didn't have any chairman's reports today, but did you have anything you wanted to go over during this time?
I'll save my updates for the body of the agenda.
Okay. And financial report, Debbie.
Good morning. The year-to-date expenses through the month of February was $3,669,888.11. Our cash balance at the end of February was $2,683,885.89. And our total cash disbursements for the month of February was $600,109.80. Is there any questions? If not, I'd like to ask for board approval of the February 2021 financial report.
We have a motion to approve.
Mayor Dave, motion to approve.
Commissioner Wyrick, second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the February 2021 financial report. All those in favor signify by raising your hand. And opposed, signify vocally. And that's approved. Thank you.
Just while we're on financial report, I do want to make sure that the board is aware that we're currently going through our annual typical State Board of Account audit right now. This year's a little different in that due to the pandemic and staffing and a number of other things, State Board of Accounts has chosen to engage a third party to do our audit. So we're being audited by Crow. That's the first time that we are not being audited by SBOA staff. So that's just a little different, but other than that, that is progressing. I would hope that would be wrapping up soon. Obviously, there are timings of when that would come to the board and everything regarding that. But if you're thinking that it has been at least a year since we've had that audit and have been wondering where that is, it is in process. It's just SBOA was slightly delayed this year. So you will be seeing that in the coming months. So just informational.
And James, going from Crow to from SBOA to Crow, is there going to be a significant cost increase for the audit?
That's a great question about cost. SBOA had negotiated prices with them that should be fairly in line with what we had paid historically. The ultimate question will be on the number of hours logged, but the rate seemed appropriate. It wasn't completely third-party prices because it was negotiated through State Board of Accounts.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other questions on that? Okay, we can move on to the Secretary's report.
Yeah, Secretary, just would like to make sure you guys look in your packet. There is a few administrative modifications there for March.
Any questions from anyone on the modifications? Okay, we'll move on to old business. I don't believe there is any old business.
There is no old business today.
Okay. And now new business, James.
Yep, so Caitlin Stevens will be presenting a few items where we will be processing amendments for our transportation improvement program.
Good morning. First, we have Resolution 19-21, which is in the Fort Wayne District, locally initiated. Item A is for a locally initiated project in Elkhart County. It's Bridge 148 over Sunnyside Avenue Mall Drive. This was a project that was awarded as part of the local tracks program. This action is decreasing funding by $1.4 million, and that's largely just to kind of maneuver some funding to different bridges in the project. I believe there's a total of 5 bridges, all have unique DES numbers for this project, so it's mostly just clerical. But that is item A. Item B is for Kosciuszko County, also the local tracks project that was awarded there for County Road 1300 North extension over Norfolk Southern and Main Street. This item is to add PE to a new DES number, and this item is largely for railroad coordination. And then item C is also for Kosciuszko County. It's Bridge 9 Husky Trail over Deeds Creek. The project is a bridge replacement, and it was most recently awarded as part of NDOT's call for projects, and this is adding in construction to fiscal year 2024. If there are no questions, I would ask for your approval of Resolution 19-21.
Commissioner Griner, I'd move to approve.
And do we have a second?
I'll second this.
We have a second now. We have a motion and a second to pass Resolution 19-21. All those in favor signify by raising your hand. And opposed, signify vocally. And that passes. Thank you.
Resolution 20-21 is an NDOT initiated project. This project is located actually in the LaPorte district, and it's located along State Route 10. It's an HMA overlay, and both items A and B are adding in right-of-way from US 31 to State Route 117 near Culver. If there are no questions, I would ask for your approval of Resolution 20-21.
Commissioner Wyrick, move to approve.
And do we have a second? We have a second now. We have a motion and a second to pass Resolution 20-21. All those in favor signify by raising your hand. And opposed, vote vocally. And that passes. Thank you. Move on to the next resolution.
All right, Resolution 21-21. This is for the endorsement of the fiscal year 22 Unified Planning of Work Program. So MACOG works on a state fiscal year, so we run from July 1st through June 30th. So July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2022 would constitute our fiscal year 22. Every year, we put together what's called a Unified Planning of Work Program, or the UPWP, and this outlines all of the work that MACOG will be doing related to transportation planning. This is predominantly a document that outlines how we will spend our annual apportionment or our annual kind of funding for planning that we receive, being a metropolitan planning organization, as well as then funding that we receive for doing the like planning in rural areas. A lot of this work is continuous, so it is not necessarily lots of new programs or initiatives, but really the continuation of much of the work that we already do. Some notable items that make this UPWP slightly different than normal is just some highlighted plans that we will be working on, such as our freight mobility plan that is out for requests for proposals right now, and we're working through that solicitation process, as well as then one larger item that is in this work program in the towards the end in the 600 work element, I believe, is for pictometry. So we have flexed over Surface Transportation Program funds to purchase pictometry, which is a type of aerial imagery for our 4 counties. This is something that we had agreed to do 2 years ago, and it's really a continuation of that program, as usually there are 3 flights done over a course of 6 years. So this would be considered Flight 2. And we participate at a 70% rate in each of our counties pictometry, and they participate at a 30% rate. So that's not in the UPWP every year. It's only in there every 2 years. So if you were new to the board last year, you might not have seen that, so you might think that that is a larger expense than normal. But if you go back 2 years ago, you'll have seen it there as well, so it is fairly standard. Other than that, the Federal Highway Administration had some planning emphasis areas, not exactly changing the work that we're doing, just continuing to highlight some of the things that they want us to emphasize. But for the most part, this document is really a continuation of pretty much all of our programs for transportation planning. I can try to answer any questions that anyone might have over the UPWP. Today we would be asking for your endorsement and approval. The one caveat or asterisk I would ask is that we occasionally receive comments from, say, NDOT or Federal Highway Administration where we might need to make a small technical change, a non-substantive change. This might be an addition error, or it might be a transposition in numbers, or it might be just clarifying and adding in scheduling information. I would ask that with the approval of this document, that if we receive any comments like that from NDOT or Federal Highway, that I have the ability to change that, just so that we can make sure that this document goes through the appropriate routing processes through NDOT and Federal Highway, that we will have our kind of notice to proceed and FEMA's obligations before July 1st or on July 1st, so that we won't have any stoppage of work for our staff. Like I said, I can answer any questions related to the document or provide any clarifications.
Thank you, James. Do we have any questions, comments on this? If not, do we have a motion to approve Resolution 21-21?
Mayor Wood, motion to approve.
I second it.
We have a motion and a second to approve Resolution 21-21. All those in favor signify by raising your hand. And opposed, please vote vocally. And that passes. Thank you. Go on to Resolution 22.
Resolution 22-21 is for the endorsement of the fiscal year 22 to 26 Transportation Improvement Program. This listing is essentially the short-term list of federally funded or regionally significant projects that will be happening over the next 5 years. So the plan went out for public comment for the month of March. We did receive one public comment from a nonprofit transportation provider asking to be incorporated into our planning processes, which we will be able to do through our Equitable Mobility Action Plan. The other comments we received were from FTA, Federal Highway, as well as NDOT. Largely, these were clerical issues or clerical items to address in the program, be it adding a project or just modifying a few notes. We did receive a comment from Federal Highway related to consistency of our transportation improvement program with our long-range transportation plan. It was a similar comment that other MPOs throughout the region had received, and in particular, it was to address bridge replacements and road reconstruction projects. If you notice, we don't have those projects specifically listed by location in our long-range transportation plan. And that's largely because it's supported by our long-range plan through policy. And so we consider TIP projects consistent with our long-range plan if they are listed in the plan, or if the project supports the policies and purpose of the transportation plan. So we do have an asset management section in our long-range transportation plan that kind of highlights how those projects are selected through data-driven decisions. And so those were the large bulk of comments that we received. As always, this is a living document, so we'll continually modify and amend in future meetings. But I would, if there's no questions, ask for your endorsement of fiscal year 22 to 26 Transportation Improvement Program.
Thank you, and thank you for all the work the staff puts in on this one. there any questions or motion from the board?
Commissioner Groninger, I move to approve.
Mayor Wood, second.
We have a motion and a second to pass Resolution 22-21. All those in favor signify by raising your hand. And opposed, vote vocally. And that passes. Thank you. Move on to 23.
All right. Resolution 23-21 is for the authorization for the executive director to execute memorandums of understandings for the procurement of electric vehicle charging stations. If you're not familiar, MACOG, working with multiple communities in the region, as well as public library, worked to submit a application to IDEM for the Volkswagen settlement funds, and was successful in receiving funding for various charging stations throughout the region. To help facilitate that process of procuring the electric vehicle charging stations, providing some expertise as well as then perhaps some regional consistency, MACOG organized the procurement that the local governments and the library and the entities could opt into. They didn't have to procure through us. Many of them have chosen to procure through us. And so this is a resolution that we would enter into with any of those entities that are procuring through us the electric vehicle charging stations. I'm not the subject matter expert per se on this. A lot of the heavy lifting and a lot of the great work of this was done by Leah Thill of our office. So if we have specific questions on locations or the exact kind of information, Leah would be able to answer those. I could hopefully answer any questions related to the memorandum of understanding, but this would authorize us to enter into those agreements, and largely these agreements spell out that MACOG will do the purchase, how the kind of breakdown of funding will go for each location, and then kind of the standard terms that are a part of IDEM's agreement about how those stations are sited and located. So that's really what the agreement spells out. But I could answer any questions related to that. Leah could answer any questions. Otherwise, we would be asking that I could sign off on those memorandums of understanding.
Thank you, James. Goshen put in a charging station a couple of years ago now, and it's used nonstop, so we're happily participating in this program.
Yeah, but I think it's used by you only, isn't it?
There's a couple others that use it too. Does anybody else has any comments of value?
I just have a question as far as how much of these would we need to do? Because how long, if you have gas in your car for the years, you know how far you could go. But with the electric, it's not as, I don't know, I don't understand. So how many things would we need to do to be able to support that?
Sure. My comment would be that we're looking for a basic level of publicly accessible around town charging. I'm not envisioning that local governments would try to provide all that's needed, because there is a business case for this type of level 2 charging station. Your Whole Foods, Walmarts, they want wherever you want people to dwell for a long time, but currently there are just gaps where City of Elkhart has no publicly available charging stations at all. So we're trying to provide that basic level, and then the private market can fill in as more cars are on the road, as well as the state through the Volkswagen program, through the separate pot of money, the level 3 fast charging money is, I think, $5.5 million going towards fast charging stations to hit the highways and interstates. So that'll be huge. But yeah, we're not, this is not just the start of a long plan to build hundreds of these with local funds, I would say. That's my take on it. And then just wanted to provide a comment on the communities that are participating on the public, or on our joint procurement. Culver, Town of Culver, City of Elkhart, City of Mishawaka, and City of Warsaw have already signed this memorandum. As Mayor mentioned, City of Goshen and as well as Goshen Library have an intent to sign this agreement soon. City of Plymouth and City of South Bend are on a different timeline, so they do not intend to participate.
And Goshen doesn't intend to, on the government side, put in an extreme amount of these, but having access to them does help people in your community decide to make the move to an electric car. And then as you get more of those cars in your community, the business community will step up and start installing them as well. Any other questions or comments? If not, if there's a motion to approve.
Mayor Wood, motion to approve.
And a second? We got a second? We have a motion and a second to pass resolution 23-21. All those in favor signify by raising your hand. And opposed, please vote vocally. And that passes. Brings us to our staff updates.
Good morning, this is Elena Parrish. I have a quick update on a grant that was announced earlier this month. The Bloomberg Philanthropies, has announced that the Asphalt Art Initiative Grant Program, it's up to $25,000 for low-cost asphalt art interventions that will improve pedestrian street safety. As you can see on the picture there, they not only look good, but they also help bring awareness to where pedestrians are crossing or using the roads. Applications are due April 30th, and they're planning to announce awards by the fall of 2021. Any city is eligible to apply. They do have project team restrictions that must include both a nonprofit fiscal agent and a city agency, and they do prefer that the agency with jurisdiction over streets is included. If you'd like more information on the grant, if you'd like to learn more about eligible projects or view past projects that were selected, their website is asphaltart.bloomberg.org, or you can reach out to me.
I don't know if it would do much for vehicular safety. I'd be tempted to want to stop in the middle of the intersection and get out and look at it. Very cool.
Any other questions, comments on this? Okay, move on to our next item.
All right, also on the electric vehicle topic, AEP or Indiana Michigan Power has funding available for electric buses. So this is either transit or school buses due in about a month. This would cover the incremental cost of replacing an older diesel bus with electric compared to if you were replacing it with a new diesel. So it can cover up to $250,000 if the difference is that amount. And then this is a private source of funding, and so such a project would be eligible for other, for example, federal or state opportunities to piece that funding together. Unfortunately, just the Indiana Michigan Power Service Territory, so we're talking Elkhart, Goshen generally. I know there's interest in electric school buses in NIPSCO territory in some communities, but does not appear that this would be made available to them. That's all I have on that item.
Would Transpo be interested in that?
I have reached out to them, and they are currently continuing to replace their vehicles with CNG. That's their plan.
What about the trolley?
So the challenge with the trolley side, although we would theoretically be interested in any alternate fuel vehicle we would evaluate, the one challenge that we are working through and trying to understand is that MACOG does not own the facility in which buses, we don't own any location where buses either are stored or where buses, say, board and deboard in the downtown locations or anything like that. So the challenge ultimately is that we do a contracted service every 5 years, and if we ever changed contractors due to the competitive procurement, any equipment that we installed, say for charging or for CNG or propane or any other kind of fueling facility, if you will, we would have to then try and take with us to whatever location then that new vendor ultimately is providing. That poses an inherent challenge and makes it difficult. It's something that we're trying to work through in the future, and as technology improves, I think there could be a lot of opportunities, or as we look at downtown kind of location for the transfer center, there might be opportunities, but that is a limiting factor right now as we change over our fleet historically of why we've gone for just newer diesel vehicles.
Yeah, additionally, the comment I would add is that the interurban trolley vehicles, I believe, are 2012 or newer.
Correct.
So they would not be eligible for this type of funding for at least 3 more years. I think current eligibility is like 2009 or older, something like that. So that's why we've not been
Yeah,
exploring
we
it
went
in
through a
detail.
large fleet changeover in 2013 through 15, so all of our vehicles are fairly new. So when they are looking at older vehicle replacement, I guess the good news is we don't qualify for older vehicle replacement for a few more years.
All right. If there are no further questions on that item, go on to the next one, which is related. The third round of Volkswagen funding for on-road and off-road vehicles and equipment is available, and that's due June 1st. This is anticipated to be the final round. There could be additional amounts of money in a 4th round. But what's new this time is that diesel-to-diesel projects are not eligible as they were in some previous rounds. So all projects will be diesel to propane, CNG, or electric. The funding levels are 25% reimbursement for CNG and propane and 75% reimbursement on electric applications. So if you have any questions or want to see the details, I'm happy to provide that.
Thank you, Leah.
And one last item from me. Partners for Clean Air this year will be a virtual-only event on April 28th, and I'm happy to send the link out to register, but that's also in our MACOG Gazette where you can find that link, or on our website. This year we'll be featuring the typical regional air quality update, as well as what I'm excited about is to showcase the Wani Community Schools transition to propane buses.
All right, any questions, comments for any of those items? Okay, we can move on to our mobile active transport.
Yeah, so we recently received our next round of purchases from EcoCounter for active transportation counters. And as part of that purchase, we also procured 2 mobile counters that can be moved to various sites. And so as we're building out the schedule for this spring, summer, and fall, we're kind of seeking sites from local governments that are wishing to collect data, be it to support grant applications or justify new infrastructure, or just curious to see what kind of usage is happening along the trails. And so if you have particular sites or trails that you're interested in collecting bike and pedestrian data on, feel free to reach out to Elena or myself, and we can kind of incorporate you into our schedule this summer.
So the next few items, want to make sure that you're aware of procurements that we have been moving forward on that are in process. The first one is the Regional Freight Mobility Plan. This request for proposals was due on April 1st. We did receive 4 proposals from pretty nationally regarded firms that focus on freight and freight mobility. The evaluation committee has scored those, and we have narrowed it down to 2 firms that we will be interviewing on April 23rd. So after the interview on April 23rd, I'll be reporting back to you on the firm that has been selected for us to move forward. We've received great proposals from all 4 firms, so I think we'll be in good hands with whichever firm is ultimately selected after that interview process. That's the first item, and that freight mobility plan, I mean, it's kind of in the name. It'll focus on freight movement, freight mobility, understanding kind of the regional freight movement and where there may be opportunities or challenges to freight movements. It'll predominantly be looking at on-road, but of course, in our region, we had a number of scope items that focused on rail as well, since we have a significant amount of rail that runs through the region. and being able to understand that, as well as other kind of freight movements like pipeline, et cetera, but predominantly on-road freight. That's the first item. The next item is to report back on our procurement for the Regional Disaster Recovery and Economic Resiliency Plan. We did receive quite a few proposals for this. It was, off the top of my head, about 8 firms, I believe, or 9 firms. See, I knew I'd forget somebody. My apologies. So we did receive 9 proposals, which is great overall, competitive, both from local and nationally regarded firms. Our staff evaluation committee went through that process. We scored all those proposals. There was kind of a natural break for scoring in the point totals right after the 3rd firm. If we selected the 4th firm, it almost felt like from a scoring perspective, we should select the 4th, 5th, and 6th because the point margin was so close on those. So we decided to interview 3 firms. Upon those interviews and taking into account the scoring processes, we have engaged Fourth Economy. They're a consulting firm out of Pennsylvania, and you may be familiar with them as they were the firm that the region worked with for the Regional Cities Plan. So we will be engaging with them on that to work through the Disaster Recovery and Economic Resiliency Plan that we've talked about in previous meetings that would focus on understanding the impacts of COVID-19, what things have recovered, what things are lagging, what those scenarios in the future might look like for recovery, and how we could build in resiliency for the future. It's a pretty broad scope, and it will, under the current timeline, we are looking at kind of a fall completion of that. We will be forming a steering committee for that plan, and as always, we would always welcome board participation in that steering committee. In the past, for those kind of plans, we've usually asked for 2 to 3 board members. If you have an interest, we would welcome your participation in that, and so we would be able to get you more information on what that commitment looks like. But if you do have an interest in that, either speak now or always feel free to send me an email to volunteer to serve on that steering committee. The other 2 items that I had that are more of an update purpose but did not make the official agenda, I'm not asking for any sort of action. These are largely, this first one is more informative. Last month, we talked about the American Rescue Plan and the funding that would be provided to counties and local cities and towns. Wanted to make sure that since that meeting, you have seen some kind of important memos that have come out from State Board of Accounts. Most notable was one that came out on March 18th that outlines kind of what the process will look like for the American Recovery Plan funds. That the funds will remain available through December 31st of 2024. The first payment from the fund to the state of Indiana is supposed to occur on May 11th of 2021, and then the state will distribute those first payments received from the fund within roughly 30 days of the allocation. So you're talking about a June timeline for those funds. There are a few items that local governments will need to do in order to be eligible. The most notable, which many of you have probably from my watching have done, but if you haven't, the most notable is the governing body must adopt an ordinance establishing a local ARP or American Rescue Plan fund. In county cases, that ordinance should be adopted by the county commissioners. For a city or town, that should be an ordinance of the legislative body. within that ordinance, it will have a list of the uses that are described in what they say is section 603C, which is the, I believe, the ARP section that discusses the fund usage and the allowable and eligible use types. And that the ordinance will then also have a plan, and the plan would outline or lay out in a way that the elements that will be done in a way that corresponds with section 603 of eligible use of funds. Like any ordinance or any plan, that can be amended in the future as local governments have those abilities to amend, and as long as it complies with section 603. If you need me to send out this memo because you don't feel like you have it, I'd be more than happy to do that. I know we're going to be reaching out to towns as well regarding where they might be at in understanding the ARP funds. But I thought it also might be a good time to understand from everyone where everybody's at with those American Rescue Plan funds. If you've kind of already handled the ordinance and plan, if you're needing any examples or any assistance, just as this is a large undertaking and a significant amount of funding. And so wanted to understand if units of local governments may need any assistance with this process. So I had opened it up if anybody had anything kind of related to those rescue plan funds.
Hey, James, I have a question. It came across my desk on, like the day I got back from vacation. And so I'm still, I haven't followed up on it, but one question I would have is there a deadline that you've seen that we have to establish that ordinance? And two, the way we are approaching it is suggesting some usage based on the criteria in the plan that you just mentioned, and then as well as appropriating ambiguous dollar amounts for each of those. Is that generally what you would think?
Yeah. So first off, I mean the first half of funding is going to be in June, and then they don't even have a date yet for the second half of funding. So I think there will be some generalities in any of these plans, and just that whatever you're laying out has the eligibility uses, that you're meeting with those uses of section 603C, which there are about 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 elements that are eligible uses. And that if you're more general now, you can always amend it later to be more specific if that was needed.
Thank you.
Hey, Susie, I know what we had heard was they would not send any of those funds until you have that ordinance in place or
That's
that
correct.
resolution in place. So, you know, they're not going to deposit the money in your account till you have it. So I guess if you're, depending on how quick you want it in your bank account, I guess that's your deadline on when you need to have it done by. But I
Yeah,
know the other thing that I'm seeing is, I know at least talking with AIC, they're talking like, if we have other uses that we would like to use that money for, they're looking for feedback to see whether or not, a lot like the CARES Act money, that they may expand what some of those uses might be in the future. So if you have something that doesn't fit the criteria, I would get with your people and try and get some information to them, because I think they're going to try and lobby to see if that can't be broadened.
I was honestly just concerned because I felt like with the rent and assistance program, for us to set the ordinance and based on the funding we were getting and then get the rules was a little confusing. And so I wasn't necessarily in a hurry because I don't know how specific with those 5 guidelines are yet. I mean, they're broad. I don't know if anything says that you must use a certain percentage for X, because it did with the rent and utility assistance program, and so I just was trying to do one ordinance, but it sounds like we can be vague, so I'm all right.
Yeah, and to Commissioner Groninger's point, I guess I did not answer the first part of your question, which is I have not seen a deadline for when that ordinance needs to be in place, but as the Commissioner correctly pointed out, if you do not have the ordinance and plan in place, you're not going to receive those funds until you do. Those funds should be available for use through December 31st of 2024, but I have not seen a deadline in which you have to have that ordinance and plan in place. So I wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of that. We'll try and get some more information out to you, just to make sure if you have any questions, if you need any examples, we'd be happy to try and pull that together to share those resources amongst entities. I know it's something that we'll be talking to small towns about what their kind of allocations look like and trying to provide some coaching if they have those questions. The other item that I wanted to talk about, which was a follow-up from last month. Last month, we talked briefly about how MACOG is working with Purdue Center for Regional Development on potentially hosting a digital inclusion fellow. One of the kind of main scopes of work that we envision with that digital inclusion fellow, amongst a plethora of other things, was the potential to work with a lot of our Main Street organizations, especially in rural areas that have asked for some assistance, and if there was any opportunity that this person could perhaps put on workshops or put together resources to help businesses in kind of the main streets compete in the digital market space. So that was a potential scope of work item, as well as then working with local governments on pursuing kind of any grant applications or funding opportunities that may emerge from either state or federal kind of broadband-related items. We were moving forward with that, and I guess I don't want to use past tense. We still are moving forward with that, but we have been approached by a now unique opportunity, and not just us. I guess Purdue was approached by Lead for America, who is also partnering with Land of Lakes of butter fame. Land of Lakes has a vested interest in trying to assist rural areas in staying in the kind of digital inclusion space, as they represent a number of farmers and folks that make up their kind of supply pipeline. They have, through Lead for America, have created a 2-year fellowship program that, if anyone is familiar with what we did many years ago at this point with Solarize, where we worked with Solarize, or the Solar Foundation, as well as then the federal government on that, to land through a national program, a fellow who would assist us with the Solarize program, where they would provide national kind of training and kind of peer resources. It models a very similar kind of setup. If those of you who aren't maybe familiar, that's how Leah came to work for us back in that time frame as that Solarize fellow, and then we were able to retain her on staff long term. This is a little bit different than what Purdue had outlined in the sense of commitment. It would be a 2-year commitment, and we would potentially have to partner providing up to $25,000 to host that fellow and providing kind of a living stipend, if you will. It is an interesting opportunity and something that I will be wanting to talk with many of you about the opportunity to pursue that, as we anticipate there being a growing vested interest from the federal government, as well as what we've seen on the State House front of programs continuing to roll out that focus on broadband expansion, and those kind of items that have been heightened due to the COVID pandemic, as well as then just kind of everyone has constantly been focusing on trying to improve broadband, as we talked about a little bit last month. So it is a very unique opportunity. We are excited about that opportunity because it could put us on a national spotlight with some national resources, as well as then kind of a peer program where we can learn from each other and be able to implement kind of the scope of work that we're looking at on a longer timeline. It does, of course, come with a larger funding requirement, but I don't want to initially close that door just because it's a slightly larger bill. Not asking for any decision today, just wanting to brief you on that development and kind of the change from last month of where we were going, that it is now broadened even more, and there could be additional resources and kind of interest in doing this. So wanted to see if anyone had questions, be able to answer those. Obviously, I just got this information and had a debrief with Purdue yesterday, so it's fairly new. So I'm kind of reacting to it as well, but wanted to see if there were any questions, comments, concerns, anything that folks wanted to talk through on that. Otherwise, that would conclude our staff updates.
Thank you, James. Appreciate it. That brings us to privilege of the floor. Is there anybody wish to bring something to the board that was not on the agenda? Okay, we'll close privilege of the floor and open public comment. Is there anybody that wishes to have public comment?
So we have asked for public comment to be submitted in advance of meetings. We have not received any public comments for this meeting, so we do not have any public comment.
All right.
Before we adjourn, if I could add one thing.
Sure.
We have mentioned this in the past, but I want to make sure that everyone's aware. We will continue at this point to offer hybrid meetings where we will have both the online option and then the in-person option. We will obviously evaluate what we will have to do per any state legislature kind of bills that get passed here to continue to offer that hybrid option in the future. As we do that, I want to make sure everyone's aware that as of right now, you can kind of put it on your calendar or plan that when we do have the in-person option, that we will be meeting on the 4th floor here in the County City Building in these chambers. We have this space reserved through the end of the year. We may evaluate as we go forward about having some meetings in each of the counties just to mix it up so we can share drive times amongst folks. But we are doing that because we have worked with the county. The county has been very gracious. MACOG has kind of been short on some space, and in order for us to tackle some of the programs we're doing, we have some increased staff, and we've been needing space and having that conversation for about the last 3 to 5 years. We are working through, and the county has worked through, and I don't have a timeline yet for construction, but we will be building some office spaces in our previous conference room. So we will be kind of cannibalizing that conference room interimly. And then we have been able to get some additional space working with the county as well, kind of on our more southern wing of the building. So as of right now, we, in the next few months, may not even have a conference room. So we will be planning to host the meeting here on the 4th floor through the end of the year. We're really excited about improving the space that we have because it'll provide our staff with a lot of great things, but wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of that so you didn't find yourself walking up to the 11th floor if you come next month.
So James, just curious, are there any board members who are showing up in person, or is it almost all virtual?
Well, today we have 4 board members in person.
Okay.
Last month we had 1 board member in person. So I think it ultimately depends kind of on where people are at. you know, A, from an availability perspective, but B, on vaccinations and all those kind of other things. But when we are meeting, the nice thing about this 4th floor space, it is extremely larger than our 11th floor conference room. So we do have the ability to space appropriately. The room is well equipped with hand sanitizer, as well as, I hope, from those at home, the audiovisual experience is still good. And that there also, if an audience comes, there's plenty of public seating as well. So we do have some folks who are coming in person.
This is the first meeting I've come in person, and I just want to say I think that it'd be a good idea if you're comfortable coming back. I think in Goshen, you're trying to do in your communities too, but trying to figure out how to bring people back together, and there's just real value in having everybody in the same room for board meetings. So, but James is right. This room is plenty large to spread out in, and encourage you to maybe give it a shot next month.
I will say the one downside, and this isn't just, but the one downside is that we're not allowed to have food and drink in here. So if you are coming and expecting any pastries that are usually my MO of providing, unfortunately, we're just not able to do that in this space.
I think you could provide those cookies wrapped individually to go.
Like on the go?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that might be needed, but you know,
Yeah.
just those cookies.
We were actually talking about that, of whether or not we could do on the way out. Thanks for coming, but we'll continue to evaluate that.
Any other comments from anyone? Okay, thank you all for your participation today. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
In a second?
Commissioner Groninger, second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you all. Have a great day.